Howdy and welcome to Sunburnt Gaming. While we are arranging a discussion slash review video on the Curseborne RPG that has just done a Kickstarter, some of the people I know have suggested that I go through the Chronicles of Darkness game lines and just do a quick tier list, just to show my views on a few of the different game lines. Oddly, the first tier list I was able to pull up had a interesting choice of categories. Let's first just change that from mage to haven't played yet. And we'll just put that down there. Okay, so, and with that, the only one I haven't had a chance to play or run yet has been Deviant the Renegades. Now that one, it looks pretty good. The design of it is immensely flexible when it comes to the power creation, while still giving it a feeling of grittiness and limitation behind each of your character's powers. They also do a very good work with their conspiracy system, which theoretically leads to a lot more direct back and forth and serves as a very good foundation for a gameplay loop. The explanation on how characters structure and buy their variations, the powers in Deviant, is a bit convoluted and could definitely be explained a bit better. There's also a bit of there's some limitations where they tie a lot of the mechanics to trying to enact out your character's specific revenge fantasies and catharsis gaining. So you'll generally want them to be focusing on their own conspiracy a lot of the time, which makes a lot of sense for a character. But it has the issue that there are generally multiple people at the table, and conspiracies are pretty hefty mechanically. So actually giving them that time for that spotlight can be a bit difficult sometimes. So I do wonder how well this instability mechanic will actually play. You don't get as many opportunities to do your character's thing if that spotlight isn't shared as much, because I know you do get penalized and your character becoming more unstable the less you can mess with your character's stuff. Let's see. So with that one being the only one I haven't played, we'll just have that one sitting down there. Okay, first up with the real ones, we've got Beast. Ooh. So, setting-wise, and in regards to its immensely problematic aspects and history, you're stuck down the bottom with all its yikesness. It has an immensely, because of a result of a communication issue between the lead developer and all the writers, the game's design is split between two different, very different mindsets. One thinking it's about queer allegories and minority allegories who are being hated simply for existing, and another portion of the writers who thought they were writing unrepentant monsters who deserved everything they got. The writing, mixing those two together, and when you sometimes get those two mindsets on the same page, that is a very that context and that subtext is awful. I've seen some freelancers being very disheartened by how their writing gets recontextualized when combined with the other parts of the books. And that's really unfortunate to see, especially because the atavism's powers and the concept of layers are really, really good, and they do have some issues where they took a few books before they figured out exactly how the primordial dream works, which is a very major aspect of the game, which is very unfortunate. Oh, there's also the issue that the game doesn't really give you much to do aside from feed. They eventually tried to expand it by giving extra factions in the player's guide and adding in cults as an element, but those didn't really land especially well. The game is very directionless, and you really need to make your own fun, you could say. If I could go just off the mechanics, it'd probably be a decent amount higher, but it's really kept down by its setting and its very muddled, directionless nature. Changeling. So Changeling is a game that was one of Changeling and Geist were the ones that actually got me into Chronicles of Darkness as a teenager. Changeling First Edition was just amazing in regards to its tone, and yeah, I think like if I was just looking at even just considering First Edition, that is immensely evocative of a game. The art is beautiful, the writing great at trying to get you to tap into the horrors of their situation, but also trying to shine a light on the magic that is still in these characters' lives. Flavor of all these contracts is also very engaging, especially when supplements expanded and gave more rules and support for characters going out of their way to make deals with concepts themselves, which I preferred a lot more to the very rigid pre-made lines of contracts. Second edition, I'd say, is a bit of a mixed bag. Rules-wise, it did make some strides. The contract system is now a lot more open, rather than being rigidly stuck into 1 to 5 dot powers. Magical system to handle oaths is constrained in second edition, much to the dislike of a lot of people, but honestly prefer the more freeform setup that second edition went with than the very cold, you could say, point system that the contracts used to use back in first edition. That said, the tone of the game, something with the writing style, just seems lacking. The game seems a lot less focused. It seems a lot more trying to jam in as much stuff as it can, but it doesn't feel like it pulls it off. It just sort of is a bit of all at once, and not enough as much thematic focus and grounding as first edition had. Second edition also did have the lacking element of its edge spinning rules and its dream rules are a bit of an annoying mess, and they keep adding extra subsystems with each supplement that generally just adds a bit of clutter and doesn't. I don't personally feel that it earns its place a lot of the time, but I don't know that I would put it at the best of the best anymore. I feel like if you put first edition up in A, second edition in B, maybe C. So if I just have to give if I have to give one rating, I think B for Changeling. But first edition definitely gets an A. Geist. No, Demon first. Demon is amazing. It is honestly surprising how well it went with as its first edition. A lot of the Chronicles of Darkness game lines started with a rough first edition and got really heavily refined into a second edition. But Demon started out right out the gates really good. Its take on fallen angels cut off from their gnosis and being trapped in the false human identities that they had while serving their god. And now they're on the run, hiding, being spies, acting against this near omnipresent, near omniscient force, this system. All the while you're doing cool spy shit. It does just a great job thematically, gives a very strong gameplay loop focus so everyone at the table can know what they're going to be doing. Demon does get a bit of a backlash from some people because of how it went with a very technological aesthetic for a lot of its things, and why it uses the God Machine, and it does detach from some of the pop culture imagery we normally associate with demons and angels. But the game does make sure to be flexible enough to still contain those. Let's see. Now we have Geist. Geist was a game that the first edition, I really loved as a teenager, but it was honestly, like, design-wise, it's a mess. It is not sure if it wants to be a slice of life thing where you're just doing drunk parties and leaping off bridges for the thrill and then surviving, or if you're meant to be doing lots of big cult stuff and having a giant subsystem around finding out what sort of angel your lower or whatever your geist is. Mechanics like keystones, whether or not it wanted you to go around helping ghosts. It was a very, very clumsy game that did not know what it wanted to be. Its mechanics also sometimes made a bit of a burden for GMs, as Sin Eaters could look at anyone and go, okay, this is how close they are to death. Whenever you walk into a place with death, you got a feeling, and you could get the vibes of, like, okay, someone has died here. Which is, they're powers that are very thematic, but they are a pain to GM for. Second edition did improve things, though, in a lot of ways. Some of those more niche powers ended up getting turned into their own actual, like, powers that you buy and get triggered using your powers, by spending plasm. 2E also made there to be an actual reason to go into the underworld, which was a big plus. The underworld is so much more improved. I have very much enjoyed inflicting the awfulness of the underworld upon my players. The Reapers are a very engaging enemy. Ghost Eaters, I'd say an improvement over the Abmortals of 1E. I'd definitely say it's definitely gone from being one of the lower games into at least a C. Considering both of them, it probably goes up to a B. Second edition, but having to considering the first edition of the game as well, and Geist also has a slight issue with its formatting, where whenever you want to read any of the powers, you have to flip back to the back of the book to read the condition that it creates, rather than just reading what the power does. And it leads to a very confusing reading experience for new players. So I'm thinking I may, with the first edition and that issue, I'm thinking of leaving it at C. Then we got Hunter. This is a weird one. Mechanically, it barely has any reason to exist. It is mechanically. The code is, honestly, I feel like, makes being a hunter worse than if you just used the integrity system. Hunter tactics are basically just things you should already be able to do with just the skill rolls and the normal mechanics of the game. The endowment system also is a bit weird because they tie it to only the tier 3 conspiracies, regardless of if that necessarily should be needed. It's a bit restricting for very little reason. It often led to groups that are very local in scale, and should be equivalent to a tier 2, being just written. The book just says they're tier 3 because we want to give them powers, making the tier system pointless. That said, a lot of the hunter organizations are very cool. Setting wise, there are so many concepts for campaigns, basically pre-made for you. They are a gold mine for getting everyone on the same page and giving you a central purpose for your campaign. You have so many conspiracy and compact options, each of which will give you such a different experience. A Net Zero game is so drastically different to Task Force Valkyrie, which is so drastically different from the Lucifuge. I have no idea if I'm saying that correctly, admittedly. So I think even though mechanically it's a bit limited, and I honestly don't think Chronicles of Darkness is a great engine for doing a very asymmetric combat that is involved in a lot of the monster hunting narratives, the setting and organizations and factions brought by the game is enough to bring it up from being like the bottom tier. Mage, the one that whoever made this template really liked. I also really like it. At the very least, I'm definitely going to give it at least an A, maybe an S. It's pretty damn up there when it comes to giving you a very open magic system. It gives you a very deep setting, lots of history, lots of description of what the now is like, how the internal cultures are, so that when you have a setting you're putting your game in, you have a lot of baseline. The creative freedom as a GM is pretty damn severe. I think the main downsides of the game do come in when it comes to conflict and when it comes to teaching the game. The game definitely needs to do a better job at explaining things. I think the game might be when it comes to challenging the players, Mage can have a bit of an issue. It's a very binary game. You either succeed or you don't a lot of the time. And while that can be very good for the players, you are meant to be able to solve problems pretty easily. And a lot of the time the question is just, how severe do you want to go? You can solve the problem with mind control, but it's wrong to mind control people. What about when the NPCs do that? It can be a bit of a struggle sometimes trying to give your players a solid challenge that doesn't just wipe them out and doesn't feel unfair. I know there are a lot of GMs that specifically stay away from using things like mind control or NPCs that are messing around with time travel, because they don't want to just say, okay, player, you die in your sleep, because the villain sympathetically cast on you and had a spell that just did 20 ag. That's just not engaging, not fun. And the game's main answer to this is people chucking wards and signs on themselves at really high potency, which then shifts the game to, okay, how do we do it? How do we do the exact same thing but with spells that don't use potency? Like oh, we'll just buff ourselves a ton, or we'll teleport them away, or whatever. And with the difficulty of GMing it, and I feel like maybe the issue of it's just a convoluted game when it comes to teaching, I think that may bring it down to an A, even though it is definitely one of my favorites. Just can't bring it to S. Mortals. You're a cool idea, but terrible in execution. System-wise, the game is... I mean, it's fine for handling mortals. A lot of other gamelines math problems suffer from the fact that it's designed to handle mortal scale knife fights. Werewolf definitely is a bit held back by that, but I don't really see much benefit of playing it over playing a more focused game. There's a lot of games out there that can handle investigation just a bit better. The skill list is so all over the place, and it just doesn't shine, I guess, would be the issue. Mortals just doesn't shine. Nearly every time I'm hearing someone say, oh, I'm playing this Mortals game, or blah blah blah, you find out a few minutes later that, oh no, they're actually playing with supernatural merits, and everyone's got a merit template. In which case, you're not doing a mortals game, you're doing like just a mixed game of supernaturals. You're playing a zoo game that just isn't using the main game lines, which is fine. There are some very neat, not gameline supernaturals, like the Purified and the Possessed, but I wouldn't really consider that a baseline Mortals game. It's more just this is Blue Book exists so that all the rules can be in one place and there be an easy to look at guide for the rules with the dedicated page count that the main game lines can't afford. Okay, Mummy. Mummy is, I think, solidly B tier. That is, it's a bit narrow. It's very focused on its specific vibes, but it does a very good job at making you feel like this ancient, powerful monster that is enslaved to doing your task. And it is very fun to have the characters pull out these biblical scale powers. It does have a few issues here and there. Like some of the economy of the game is a bit weird for trying to deal with the pacing mechanics. Like a lot of the time, the big guns powers are ones that are still designed to be things you lose by the end of a campaign, because you're getting weaker over time, which is very thematic and very cool. But it does mean that GMs need to shift a bit of their planning and very much take that into mind, because it is going to be, you can't be as bombastic at your ending without taking a lot of care. You need to be more bombastic in the beginning. You need to give players some severe threats early on to get them to burn their resources early. Give them those opportunities and the justifications to hit out with some very big, disastrous powers. And 2E's writers did intend to, and did work to create some antagonists that might justify that a bit more, when they brought in things like the avatars of the judges as antagonists. So that is something they've improved on, but there are still just some wonky elements, and some parts of the game just aren't well described. So I think B suits it well. It isn't. It's a bit limited, and it's got problems here and there, but it is a very flashy. It does well in its little niche, its little bubble. Okay. Promethean. I think you are gonna go down in. I think it's gonna have to go down in B. So, Promethean is a very nice idea. It has a lot of potential, you could say, being this very different story about a lot of introspection and a lot of going around on the pilgrimage, experiencing new different things and experiencing all these different types of ways of life and types of what people that you could be. If the Promethean was given a proper life, who could they be? Who do they want to grow into? And the game sort of bites off more than it can chew. The pilgrimage system ends up being a lot of work, especially when it comes to the character creation. The game really wants to be about these things, but outside of the pilgrimage system itself, it doesn't really have much backup. And that pilgrimage system is primarily just giving XP out in having multiple different types of triggers for XP. They try to tie refinements to it, but a lot of those elements don't necessarily fit into the gameplay that you're actually going to see at the table. A lot of it is slice of life type things, and the game doesn't really give you much meat to engage with those scenes. What it does give you meat for is for you to be doing episodic stories, traveling around, and then, oh no, there are you come across another Promethean who's being tortured by a alchemist to get their goo, or you come across, or your presence, you're just trying to keep to yourself, but your presence causes all these little gremlin-y creatures to come out and start creating mischief. It seems a lot more tailored to investigating and dealing with the episodic weird shit, when a lot of the refinements don't seem tied to that. They don't seem they seem a lot more okay. What people types could we come up with? And they're not always ones where you can do it on the run or while traveling and discarding everyone every couple of weeks. Like if you want to be like a soldier in an army, if you're trying to be a leader, if you're trying to be a follower, there are elements that just don't mesh well with its episodically focused format. Tui tried to fix this a bit with so that it takes longer for wastelands to form and for your disquiet to get everyone to the pitchfork stage, but it's a half measure and it isn't good enough to stick the landing, unfortunately. It's a very cool pitch, but the game just doesn't handle it well, and it's a bit of a pain to GM. Vampire. I think B suits that very well. It's another game that has a strong idea on what it is. I think it's going to be like a changeling situation where it has a lot of good parts, but then like if you just take 2nd edition core, it's up there as S. If you just take that one book, you're up there. Honestly, actually, yeah, 2nd edition core, and even if you include some of the late 1E, that is still going to stay S tier. But if you have to take into account the game line as a whole, and take that into consideration, you end up with some problems. 1st edition is primarily lacking. It was very much hot off the trails of Masquerade and struggled identity-wise for a good while to differentiate itself in a way that actually had some kick to it, some strong personality, heart and vibrance to it, and a passion. 1st edition was a bit lacking in that area. It was sort of watered down Masquerade for a good while. As I said, late 1st edition and 2nd edition core wiped away that problem. Those are really, really high quality. Some of the best Chronicles of Darkness books there are, without a doubt. But 2nd edition I don't think stuck the landing. Its supplements are a bit wonky. They seem to go with a mindset of, we don't want to give any content for a standard campaign. We'll just give you weird stuff. Which presumably was to try and not retread the content that they produced for 1st edition. But the main effect was, oh, okay, I want to run Vampire the Requiem, and I don't want to buy all these old books that don't necessarily line up thematically, so let's see what they have for the actual edition I'm playing. Oh, you've got rules for playing Vampire in different weird settings. Maybe later. I'll look at that. What else do I have? Elder games. Okay, sure. That's cool. But what do you have for a standard campaign? Well, we have a Night Horrors book that's just full of weird, not quite vampires. And the only thing you really get is Half Damned, which everyone loves the Revenant chapter. Revenant chapter? That is good. The rest of it, the ghoul and the Dampier, less so. The ghouls, a lot of it isn't bringing much new. I think some of it also had the issue of feeling very old World of Darkness. I think originally it even had mentions of the wars and hatred between werewolves and vampires, which isn't a thing. And Dampier are a bit odd in general. Their power system isn't especially flashy, and having a system for bullying your child really wasn't necessary. Um, yeah, definitely didn't need a mechanic for can I abuse my child without it being a breaking point. Just wasn't really needed. See, with that poor that unfortunately meant that all the second edition supplements after core just wasn't very satisfying. So I think we moved Vampire down to B. Even though Vampire Requiem 2E core, that shit is S tier, without a doubt. Finally, we have Werewolf, which I think that goes to A. Even with I am not a big fan of Chronicles of Darkness's combat system. I find it immensely repetitive, but damn if Werewolf doesn't make me still go through those. It is a game where the antagonists are such well-designed and engaging horrors to encounter. Your powers feel very cool. You feel like a monster, a predator. You feel like the horror monster. Especially if you take Hunter in Darkness powers and Hunter in Darkness vibe things. They're basically like slasher cabin in the woods things, and spirits give the game a lot of diversity. I do think the spirit rules need to be a bit clearer, but that's not so much an issue with the ephemeral rules need to be a bit improved in general. For all of Chronicles of Darkness, there have been so many people confused by the ephemeral manifestation chart, even though you can probably replace it with just 3 circles and like 3 arrows. But Werewolf is very high quality game line. Has not had a single bad second edition book. First edition wasn't as good as first edition wasn't as good as second, but I think it is underrated, honestly. The supplements go into a lot of detail, and there's a lot of cool world building in those. A lot of very cool antagonists. All around, I think Werewolf is definitely up there as one of the best. So there we go. There is my tier list. I'm sure that it went a lot longer than that definitely went a bit longer than I anticipated. When I said, "Oh, I'll just do a quick tier list video," but I had words to say. I'm sure not everyone will agree with this, especially given every game line is someone's favorite. And I know that there are certainly Hunter players who get very annoyed if you say that there doesn't mechanically justified. And I understand why that would be frustrating to hear. But like even with me saying that and that hot take, like your setting, your factions are just stellar. Hopefully, you've enjoyed or agreed or disagreed with some of the things I've said. If you do have other takes, if you think I missed the mark completely, feel free to comment down below.